Well, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says negotiations with Washington are off the table.
After 3 rounds of negotiation, and after the American team in the negotiation, said itself that we made a big progress, still they decided to attack us. So I don't think, talking with Americans anymore would be, on our agenda anymore.
Introducing Trita Parsi, he's the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Good to see you, Trita. So you've described the scenes in Tehran as Armageddon, with toxic black rain falling and hospitals damaged or evacuated. Is the Iranian healthcare system even capable of managing this scale of environmental, chemical warfare while under a total blockade?
No. I don't think the Iranian healthcare system is going to be able to do so, particularly not in Tehran. In other cities, the capability may be not only stronger, but less damage more than anything else. What we're seeing in Tehran are truly apocalyptic images. Even on the U.S. side, there is some hesitation about the manner in which the Israelis have done a lot of these different bombings. Taking out refineries and putting the entire city on fire. What we have not seen, however, is that these type of attacks would have broken the will of either the regime or the population. In fact, what we're seeing increasingly is a rallying around the flag phenomenon. Whether that's long-lasting or not remains to be seen. This is still a very unpopular theocracy in my assessment, but the population is also seeing that this is increasingly an attack on the country, on the country's territorial integrity, when Trump says that the map of Iran may not remain the same after this war, as well as an attack on the unity of the country, mindful of potential support for separatist organizations. All of that pushes the population closer to the government, at least during the duration of the war. And that's the same phenomenon we've seen in many other countries over the years.
Well, the US and Israel clearly aim to trigger a collapse of the leadership by assassinating Ayatollah Khamenei. Instead, we see the system, as you say, closing ranks around Mojtaba Khamenei and Ali Larijani. I mean, how's the decapitation strategy then backfired in your view, or simply changed direction for the Americans?
At a minimum, it's not worked yet. And whether the timeline for it to be able to work is one that is shorter than the timeline in which the Iranians can collapse the global economy and shoot up oil prices above $150 and cause massive global inflation, that's a different question. The Israelis certainly seem to have the capability of taking out additional Iranian leaders, and eventually perhaps there will be no one left there to take their place. But how fast can they do so, and how fast can the rest of the expansion of this war, driven deliberately by the Iranian strategy, lead to a scenario in which Trump no longer can wage this war? His presser yesterday clearly was intended to calm down the markets and make them believe that this war will be over soon. I'm not so convinced.
You've also noted, Trita, that Tehran appears to have shifted from very large missile salvo attacks to a kind of constant level of attack throughout the day. Why has the leadership concluded that a lower intensity, more persistent rate of strikes are more effective at breaking the US and Israeli pain tolerance than a single massive escalation?
Well, that strategy is primarily used against Israel. And I think the Iranians have concluded that they cannot reach Israel's pain tolerance. The Israelis have a much, much higher pain tolerance, particularly as long as the U.S. is in the war. Even the U.S.'s pain tolerance may be higher than what the Iranians had calculated, or at a minimum, it's much more difficult for them to kill American soldiers because so many of America's bases have been emptied, and much of its navy is at a distance in which the Iranians cannot reach them. So the most accessible pain tolerance is actually the global economy, and that's where I think they're putting most of their focus. On the Israeli side, they're just trying to make sure that they keep the Israelis busy and keep the population in bunkers as long as possible, rather than going for mass atrocity events, because they don't believe even in those circumstances they will reach the pain tolerance. But if the economy is not working, And if pressure in the United States from Trump's own base starts to get mobilized because of global inflation leading to American inflation and higher grocery prices, that's where they think that they might be able to reach the American pain tolerance.
So in that regard, if no end to this conflict is in sight in the medium to long term, I mean, is the Iranian leadership's strategy then to deliberately continue widening the conflict into a regional, even European crisis as a way of forcing Washington to the table, essentially making the war too expensive for everybody to be able to continue this?
Absolutely. Whether that means that the Europeans get involved or not very much depends on whether any European leaders would be so foolish to enter the war and whether the Iranians actually can reach European territory. But the idea of inflicting a significant cost on everyone is essential in the Iranian calculation, because they believe that unless this war ends up becoming so costly for everyone, so that everyone concludes that this war should not have been started, that is necessary. Otherwise, they believe the United States and Israel will use any premature ceasefire to regroup, rearm, and then relaunch the war. And that's the scenario that they absolutely need to avoid.
Now, Trita, I'd like to come back to a point you made a little bit earlier on. You talked about this concept of people rallying around the flag, given how much pain is being inflicted on Iran at the moment. I mean, before the war, the Islamic Republic faced a major legitimacy crisis, didn't it? But of course, now with school children killed in Minab and civilian infrastructure in ruins across the country, I mean, is the public's anger still directed in any way at the Iranian leadership, or has the nature of these strikes created a new defensive nationalist unity that's essentially serving the Revolutionary Guards?
It is the latter, but I think it's important to understand that that phenomenon will probably only last as long as the war is ongoing. Even during the 12-day war, we saw very clearly that there was a lot of nationalism. But as soon as the war ended a month or two later on and a new sense of normalcy emerged, the anger against the theocracy came back up onto surface. But right now, that anger is undoubtedly still there, but it is not translating into any mobilization, visible to us at least, of the population against the theocracy. That's not the priority at this point. Survival seems to be much more of the priority. But we should not be under any illusion that the war has made the system popular in an durable way. It's just a temporary phenomenon that can be turned into something longer if the theocracy plays its cards right, but we have not seen that happening in the past.
OK, Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Pleasure having you on Al Jazeera. Many thanks.
Thank you.